Through the darkness of future past the magician longs to see. One chance out between two worlds, fire, pod with me. Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of Fire Pod with Me, our Twin Peaks podcast. My name's Vinny. With me as always is my friend Steven. Say hi, Steven.
Hey.
And today we're going to be discussing that kind of divisive finale of Twin Peaks, part 18 of The Return.
Yeah, we recorded our last one for part 17, and we were going to just jump right back into recording, but we were pretty emotionally drained already, just even after talking about episode 17, so we gave ourselves a little bit of time to record this one because, yeah, it was pretty tolling, wouldn't you say?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Lots of emotions, I guess, for lack of a better word, in between both episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of like how we were talking, just even before we jump into it, like, I don't think either one of us are going to have, like, all the answers. That's not really, like, the intention of us discussing the episode, just because I don't think anyone does really have all the answers, and it's supposed to be this mystery that's going to stick with us for some time, which I think it will. I mean, I can't stop thinking about it, so...
Definitely.
Yeah, this isn't any sort of, like, analytical breakdown of each key moment, but we'll offer some theories, too, for sure.
Definitely, yeah. It's just going to be in line with how the rest of our podcasts have been. We analyze, but we're not saying that's the answer. That's not the definitive, meaning of what's going on here. And I think the point of this episode was kind of leaving it up to viewer interpretation, because just in, like, it's been 5 days since the finale, and already it's like I've read just about every kind of theory possible on this, I feel like, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, same. Yeah, the podcast is essentially our coping method.
Right.
Yeah.
My favorite thing, though, is when I read, like, a headline, and it says, like, this fan figured it out. And it's just
nah.
No.
No. Like, there's been a lot of interesting stuff, and again, we can post some of those theories at the end, but it's like, yeah, there's nothing where I'm like, yes, this guy nailed it. I can sleep at peace now, knowing that, it's like, no.
I don't think no matter how you read this episode, I don't think you're going to sleep peacefully.
No, exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that towards the end, but...
Right. Yeah, I guess let's just go ahead and start with the episode. First shot, Scale Cooper, Evil Dale Cooper, just aflame.
Yeah, that was pretty scary. That was quite the way to start the episode.
That was horrifying, but I would be lying if I said I didn't burst in laughter.
Yeah, just so casual. Is that some sort of, like, visuals that we've seen before, though? Like someone just sitting in a chair burning?
I don't think so. I mean, the closest thing I can think of is Wyndham Earl just being set aflame, but as deservedly so.
Yeah, his head
just kind of slumping down.
Do we know if was David Lynch involved in that last episode of season 2?
I thought he came back and I thought that was him who came back and directed it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, yeah, it could be because, obviously we've talked about how he was very dissatisfied with how they took season 2. So I think it was you that had posed the theory that, like, Wyndham Earl's compromise was just like David Lynch saying, like, fuck you.
Yeah.
To that whole story arc, which, if that's true, that's incredible. But
yeah. Gosh, I as much as there's, like, issues with season 2, it kind of sucks that we don't get resolution for some of the story threads that were planted in there. I mean, aside from Doppeldale, Evil Cooper coming back,
right? No, for sure. Because, like, just, I don't know, I think the way that I view the second season, it's like, even if some of the storylines weren't as great as the first series, it's like, I agree, some resolution with some of it would be nice. Like, I would like a little bit of info on why Josie's a doorknob now.
100%. I thought that maybe we were going that way in the direction of what where Audrey's story was going, but as evidence in this episode, spoilers. Although if you're listening to this, you probably should have already watched the episode. We don't see Audrey at all. There's no resolution to what's going on with her, and I think that's probably a lot of people's major gripe with this is threads that were in this season and we didn't get payoff for, which it's kind of funny to see people talking about that online, because you get the side that is like, I wish I saw what happened to Audrey. I wanted to hear Dale Cooper talk about coffee and pie somewhere or whatever. And then you have the side that's like, well, David Lynch hates you if you want that. Fuck you.
Yeah.
which is pretty funny. And I don't think either one of those is necessarily the go-to camp to be in.
Right. No, I agree.
You can't expect it all to be the same as it was 25 years ago, but you also can't belittle people for wanting some of the familiarity of the series.
Right. No, exactly. I'm with you.
Right. So, I think right after we see Scale Cooper aflame, we hear Mike say electricity and press on the little seed with some hair there, which I love. I love how the frame rate is sometimes in the Black Lodge. It's just like, it looks like it's stop motion sometimes.
Yeah. When that happened, my internet was lagging, so I wasn't sure. But yeah, there's a lot of key editing techniques like that throughout. Like the whole thing with this is a little bit of a tangent, but like with Ed at the end of the episode where he's like eating a soup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I don't think that was intentional for that. There was like a weird cut with him,
right.
And then with Tammy and Albert when they shoot the tulpa Diane, she like kind of disappears for a second, and like I don't know if that was intentional, but yeah, there's that. It is really interesting, and like because obviously I think a lot of it is intentional. But yeah, just the editing throughout this whole show is just like even more. I don't know. It's really prominent. Like. The interesting editing techniques. So
right. And it's kind of funny because like the budget for the series was really high, and a lot of the effects kind of relied on not so high budget techniques, which was another thing that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, this could be a whole different conversation, but I kind of like, I don't know, I think it leads into cementing how different and innovative the show is, I guess, but like less is more in the sense like the I don't know, with like Major Briggs's head, like just it's very simple. I mean, as like someone who edits, that's a very easy thing to do, how they cut his head out, and like
yeah.
Like it's very simplistic, and it wouldn't require a high budget. But again, like just the whole aesthetics of like that the shot of like his head floating in the White Lodge, where like Scale Coop like comes in through the cage, like it's just it kind of sticks out in your brain. You know what I mean?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's off-putting in not a necessarily negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, we keep going on these tangents. I love it, but hopefully these people love it. Anyway, we see Mike, and he creates a new Dougie, or what we can assume is a new Dougie. Where am I? Anyway, sends him to go home and live out his life with Sonny Jim and Janie E. So with this tulpa, do you think he has the memories of the Dougie before Dale entered the body?
That's interesting. I don't think so, because okay. Another tangent, listeners. But are we under the impression that the original Dougie was created by Bob, so he could like stay, like he wouldn't have to return to the Black Lodge sooner
I
because there
think
was
so.
another, right?
That's what
And
makes sense to me.
right, and also that makes sense to me because he kind of had negative impulses, and he like was involved in like money laundering. I
Hmm.
mean, he had a gambling problem. He was cheating on his wife. So I think it's safe to say that maybe the influence of him being like a seed of Bob, or like the scale coop, could influence it, because like when you see this new Tulpa, the new Dougie arrive home, he seems very happy. And so
Hmm.
I'd like to think that's because it's, he's the offspring of Dale.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I agree completely. I think it's got more Dale Cooper in there,
Yeah.
but it's kind of bizarre if they're just sending him home without memories of like building his family. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Um I know it's really hard to say because like even like the Tulpa Diane, like she regained part of her memory just very briefly though. But that was like
Hmm.
the actual Diane that she was like regaining the memories of. So yeah, like they are somehow connected, but I don't know. I think we might just be running in an infinite loop if we try and decipher it too much.
Right, right. There's a lot of stuff we're left in the dark about, obviously
Yeah.
intentionally.
But no, it is nice though that Janie E and Sonny Jim kind of have a happy ending because now they're more financially set than they were before.
Hmm.
This isn't the Dale Cooper that they were just very briefly around, just from the time that he went to the hospital, and driving. Like it's not going to be that same guy, but I think it will be kind of the Dougie that they knew when he was kind of quiet and happy going.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, I don't know. They Janie E. I mean, we laughed about this before, but like she didn't really question it too much when he changed and was just like very quiet and you know when he was acting like a newborn essentially.
Yeah,
So they seem to get along with him well. So it'll work out for them.
definitely. And that's pretty much the only happy ending in this part.
Yeah.
From then on, it just turns spooky and confusing.
Yeah, honestly, that like if that clip and like or those next few scenes, if they would have included that at the end of episode 17, it would have. And I'm probably just because of timing wise they didn't, because after that it picks up. Episode 18 picks up exactly where 17 left off. Right, they show the same scene of
Hmm.
um, Coop losing Laura in the woods. Right.
Yep, yep,
So yeah, like 17's definitely the happy ending episode, and then 18's kind of as we've put it, the new mystery, and where a lot of people are not satisfied.
right, right. Um, so yeah, we once again we lose Laura,
Hmm.
and remind me again. Does it just cut to the Black Lodge right after that, or
We cut back to the beginning of the season. Um, Mike again asks Coop if it's future or past, which has been a huge theme in this season. I guess
right,
we just didn't know it, right?
right, definitely,
Um, and yeah, this scene it's not exactly the same though as which is key, which is important to note. But it's not exactly the same as the initial scene that we see at the beginning of the season because Laura doesn't appear in the chair like she initially did.
hmm
Um, and instead of having that conversation with her, well, I guess is that when she like she flies over? Oh wait, no, that's here in a minute. Yeah, so she doesn't appear in the chair, and then Mike instructs him out of the room, and he's. This scene cracked me up, and I want to know what you think about this. But he was back with the arm in his new form, the tree branches with the brain / gum head.
right,
Um, but he says, "I am the arm, and I sound like this." And then there's kind of like this, like to me, it sounded goofy. There was like a hissing and cracking sound that he makes.
hmm
And to me, like, do you think that was a little bit of a jab at the actor, the initial actor, like mocking him?
Well, I mean, because when we see the arm in the original series, or maybe it was in Fire Walk with Me,
Uh huh.
he says the same thing. I'm the arm, and when he says that, he says, "I sound like this."
Uh huh. Oh,
Does that
that's
kind of thing.
true. That's
And so
true.
I just figured it was evolution of that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But I was just like, man, that would be pretty great, just because of all the. I know they had their discrepancies, or they, they had
Right.
some sort of beef, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, he said that he was the only good part of the show, and so David Lynch was like, "Fine, you're not coming back."
Yeah. And I mean, it worked out because he says in the original series, right? Like, when you see me again, I'll look different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Anyway, getting back on track. He says, "Is it the story?" The arm says to Coop, "Is it the story of the little girl who lived down the lane? Dot dot dot. Is it?" And that's the same thing that Charlie said to Audrey. At some point, kind of when we're first introduced to Charlie and Audrey.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that really frightens Audrey, right? When Charlie says that. I just remember, if I remember that scene
I
correctly, yeah,
I thought it
she
was
kind.
Audrey saying it to Charlie.
Oh, okay. And then is it the way that he responds that kind of scares her? I just remember a shift in like her tone, or like her demeanor when
Yeah.
that's said. So that would make sense though, if it's her saying it. I mean, I guess depending on what your theory is for what how the season ends and everything. Um, so anyway, I think after that interaction with the arm, uh, like we see Laura whispering in Coop's ear again, and then
Hmm.
she like kind of like screams and flies away.
Hmm.
And then we see our boy Leland Palmer, who once again tells Coop to find Laura, and with a very shocked, sad demeanor. There's something about the way he's sitting that cracks me up every time I see him. Um, so, as Coop said at the end of episode 17, see you at the curtain call. So he walks out of the curtain, and Diane is there waiting for him.
Right. And the way he does it is kind of like almost the Matrix. He just kind of like lifts up his arm, and the curtains kind of start waving around.
Yeah. And this is like, we've talked about this, but once Coop is out, and maybe it's when he's initially in the Black Lodge, his demeanor has changed. Just like his whole composure, and it's not the Dale Cooper that we've always known.
Hmm.
And we kind of see that when he walks out of the curtain, and like Diane asks if it's really him. Coop says it's really him. She says the same because he's not sure as well. Um, so now we see the next scene is them driving down the road together. Um, Diane asks him if he's sure that they want to do this. You don't know what it's gonna be like once we, dot
Once,
dot dot.
yeah. Once we
Uh,
cross, it could all be different.
yeah, and Coop's like, I know we're almost at that point now. I can feel it.
Hmm.
And the number that they're going for is they're driving 430 miles. At the 430 mile point is wherever they're going, wherever that destination is. So Coop pulls over at exactly 430 miles. Says this is the place. Once he like walks out, and they're by like some like electrical wires, and um, I mean it's really it's a rural area. We don't really know much about it.
Hmm.
And then Coop says to Diane, "Kiss me. Once we cross, it could all be different. Let's go." And there was something I like. It's so weird that like I feel like in a lot of shows, it just goes to show how well Cooper's character is written and how well we as the audience know him.
Hmm.
Because like even to me, and you might disagree, but when he said "let's kiss" or like "kiss me," that to me that didn't feel like a very Dale Cooper thing
In
to
character.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not at all. No.
So
It seems like somehow what happened with him and Laura just before we cut back to the lodge. it's like that changed him somehow. Like somehow he may have merged with his doppelganger.
Right. No, that's definitely what it seems, and I mean, later on it even proves it even more. So yeah, once they're driving, the electricity like transports them, and now they're driving at night.
Mm-hmm.
It fades to black, and they arrive at a motel that's kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? Just like
Yeah.
a roadside motel. Um, Coop approaches the entrance of the motel and enters. Diane's sitting in the car, and then sees another Diane also standing by the entrance.
Right.
What did you think about that? What was your initial reaction?
I mean, obviously confusion.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of this whole episode
Yeah.
is kind of we don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, it's them crossing over into maybe an alternate universe,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the Diane of that universe, and they kind of see each other and maybe even meld together at that point.
Oh, that could be yeah. That's a good point, because that's what I was gonna say is like, if we're led to believe that Mr. C, Scale Coop, and Dale have now combined and are one, yeah. Why would we see Diane's doppelganger out? But yeah, if maybe that was her crossing point for them to merge.
Right.
Um. Man, yeah. I don't really know how I want to further explain the rest of the scene. So they enter room 7. I noted that. I don't think it holds any significance, but oh, one thing. Well, we can talk about this later. I want to talk about we can at the end of the episode. Let's talk about this. But when Philip Jeffries shows Dale Cooper the 8,
Mm-hmm.
I for whatever reason the 7 reminded me of that, and I want to talk about that towards the end. But anyway, yeah, like Coop stands over by the bed and tells Diane to keep the light on, and they're like, "What do we do?" Oh no, sorry, he tells her to keep the light
off. Yeah.
They kiss, and then a sex scene ensues.
Oh yeah.
And there's, and I don't know. There's a lot of ways to interpret this scene. About what's going on, but it's kind of scary. There's I forget what song is playing, but there's like a very nice like romantic song playing, but underneath there's like very ominous music also playing. So
Mm-hmm.
you get, it kind of shows both. It's just a very off-putting and unsettling scene, because Coop, and this is, I wanted to ask you about this. Coop's face is very straight, like stoic, just like emotionless, I guess is the best way to describe it. And to me, it almost looked like he was like turning into Bob's face again, but I couldn't tell because it's a very dark.
I didn't.
Did you see that?
I didn't
or no?
see him becoming Bob, but
Okay.
he definitely wore more of a Scale Cooper face than.
Yeah, like, and so Diane keeps like putting her while they're having sex. She keeps putting her hands on his face to like cover it and not look at it, and like keeps
Right.
looking up.
Right.
So
that was one of the things I wanted to ask you was, do you think that's because she sees Evil Dale, or for another reason?
I think, what do I think? Well, to me, the reason why they did this, and I could be wrong, but so Dale's initial plan is to erase the effects of Bob that he's had on the world. So one of the biggest ones is killing Laura, and then I like to think that this is the same motel that Dale or Evil Dale took Diane to, and where she was raped, and then he created the Tulpa version of her and trapped the real Diane in the Black Lodge. So maybe this was like part of that timeline to fix it. I don't know. That's the only thing that really makes sense to me. But yeah, I don't know. I do think she recognized the evil in him, because yeah, it's something about the way he's holding his face, and I don't know if it was like the way he was holding his mouth specifically that reminded me of like when he kind of morphed with the Bob face. Um, but yeah, I do think she almost seems scared in the setting.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, she's definitely distressed. Um, I heard. I read one theory that said when it goes along with what I said earlier about her melding with the alternate universe version of herself.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, when Dale wakes up in just a second here, Diane's not there, and there's a
Yeah.
note. There's a note that's addressed to Richard,
Mm-hmm.
and it says, "I don't recognize you anymore. I can't do this anymore." From Linda, and so this person was speculating that the doppelganger of Diane that we see outside of the car is Linda, and they kind of meld together, and she's not seeing Dale Cooper. She doesn't have the same feelings that Diane has for Dale,
Yeah.
and all she sees is Richard, and she's like, I can't do this. So and then she kind of permanently becomes Linda. If that's making any sense, I don't know really how to explain it very well.
No, that makes sense. Because yeah, I mean, I kind of obviously anyone that's watched this episode, and hopefully you've watched the episode if you're listening to this, but they are in some sort of alternate timeline or reality now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it would make sense for those to, even the people that are consciously in the alternate reality to begin with, that's their normal version. For other people to jump in, it would confuse them and make it disorienting to them, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think that theory could hold some weight. What do you think about my what I was saying about the reason why they went to the motel? Is that how you took it, or do you?
I can definitely see that as like a healing process for Diane.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know why they would have to have sex though. I mean, maybe if it is part of the evil Coop that's in him, or the Bob Coop.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it's not necessarily even Bob anymore, but whoever Mr. C is, or his doppelganger. Yeah, like, because obviously she's terrified of him in that scene, but I don't know. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. But I guess we'll have a lot of time to reconsider. So
Right.
So yeah, going back to what you were saying about him waking up and he gets the letter from, and we should note that the giant or the fireman, that's part of his riddle that he tells Coop at the beginning of the series is Richard and Linda. So
and 430 with the miles.
So do you think the name Richard and Linda have anything to do with the Richard, like Richard Horn, or anything like that, or do you think those are just two separate characters? Or
that's a good question. Because there's also a Linda that's referenced by Carl, I think.
Yeah.
Early in the season, and then we of course we never see her. And I don't know if maybe those were red herrings, maybe thrown out there by David Lynch for us, or if they're connected in any way. Maybe. Gosh, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I remember people, like, before this finale, people were speculating that Linda was Richard's sister, but that wouldn't make any sense. I don't think, at least.
Right.
With now what we know, so I really don't know.
Right. I think something else that's interesting to note is that the motel room that Dale is waking up in, or Richard is waking up in, is not the same one that he fell asleep in.
Yeah. Yeah, because, so when he wakes up and he steps out the door, it's a completely different setting. They're not at the same motel, different area altogether. It looks like it might even be a different time period. I don't know, because it's hard to say. The motel is very outdated, the one that they're initially at, and now they're at, like, more of a modern-looking hotel, so it's hard to say. But whatever happened during the night, they're completely in a different setting. Um, so he gets in his car and is driving down the road, and he drives by Judy's Diner.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to go in because we know Scale Coop has got to have... Sorry, not Scale Coop. Dale Cooper has got to have his coffee. As we saw in episode 17, Scale Coop is not with the coffee. He turned down a cup of Joe.
He said, no, don't give me that.
Can't believe that. Truly an evil person.
Yeah.
So anyway, he goes into Judy's Diner, and the waitress that's there, he asks for a cup of coffee and sits down, and she goes over to wait. What?
I wanted to ask you why you thought he stopped in there, and so do you just believe it was because he wanted some coffee?
I mean, I think it's because also it's Judy's Diner a little bit. The name Judy, maybe some of that his famous intuition was telling him to stop in there.
Right. Well, because in part 17 we hear Gordon talking about how they had a secret plan. Him, Dale, and Major Briggs, they all had a plan to stop Judy. And it seems like where Cooper has gone from the end of part 17 has been to stop Judy. And so I kind of took it as maybe he knew exactly what was going on here. Because, when he enters the diner, and it's also odd because, when he sits down, you kind of expect him to be like, excited about getting a cup of coffee, but he doesn't say anything. The waitress just offers it to him, and he kind of nods. And
right. No, that's true. I agree with you, actually. And I think there's definitely some... I guess I can bring this point up towards the end, but because he's there looking for another waitress that works there who hasn't been in the last 3 days. The waitress that he speaks to says, right? So she walks away after he asks, and she goes and waits these 3 cowboy looking dudes that are at a booth, and they're kind of harassing her, and Coop says, leave her alone. And they get all macho and come over and are like, what are you going to do about it? And one thing I noticed is when, so I think the dude has a gun. He pulls a gun on Coop, right?
Yeah.
And when Coop goes and grabs the gun, he almost looks a little clumsy. For me, whatever it was about how he reached for the gun didn't seem super smooth, I guess. Maybe I'm just looking into it a little too much, because he still ended up he takes the gun and shoots the dude in the foot, or no, he kicks that dude in the balls, right? And then the other dude that goes to pull a gun, he shoots him in the foot, right?
Yeah.
And then the other dude that's with him, he's like, give me your gun, and he finally gives him his gun after he denied having one. In my notes I just said Dale takes care of bad boy cowboys.
I wrote badass Coop.
Yeah, but there's something about his again, his demeanor and his tone. Gosh, somebody give me a key count of how many times I say demeanor in this episode. But he just is. He has that kind of. His intentions are noble and for defending the girl, but there's something that's kind of cold about how he handles himself in this scene.
Right, it's something that's kind of underlying, almost in how he's acting.
Yeah. Because so he goes over and he's holding the gun that he took, and or maybe it's his gun, but he's holding a gun, and he gathers all of theirs up, but the way he's walking around holding the gun, it's almost as if he's holding the place hostage.
Right.
At first the people were like, oh, this is our hero, and then they're like, oh, this dude might be unstable. So he walks over to the waitress that he initially talked to and asks, or he doesn't ask, he demands. He says, write down the address of that waitress. And then he takes all of their guns and puts them in the fryer. Right.
When he walks over to the fryer, he goes, where do these go? He picks up the French fries, and I thought he was just gonna help her cook for a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, he tries his own secret family recipe of throwing those guns in the fryer.
And again, like, there's something that this is incredibly well written, and obviously his character has been so well written before that we know something's off. But like, he asks kind of nicely, like, where does this normally go? But then he puts the guns in the fryer and tells the cooks in the back, like, I don't know how hot this gets, but you might want to move because these bullets might come out. So like he does something nice, like, by asking, that's like, I don't know, common courtesy, like, where does this normally go? And then he puts everybody else at risk by putting the guns in the fryer. So again, we just had that contradiction of good and evil that we haven't seen in Cooper before. So he gets the address and then he's out, right? And the Cowboys are like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And so he arrives, very important to note, he arrives at the house, and we see the infamous electricity pole, the telephone pole that we've seen in Fire Walk with Me, the scene when the kid gets killed this season. Where else have we seen it?
Well, what's interesting is when Andy visits the fireman a few episodes ago, this exact shot was one of the things that he showed him.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Of this pole. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Man. Again, I've said this to you, but I just want to rewatch. We will, like, we're gonna rewatch everything, but it's like, man, I just want to rewatch it and like decipher it all now that I have the whole thing. Anyway, so yeah, that telephone pole is right by this address. And he walks up to the door, and it's who we know her as, Laura, but she says her name is Carrie Page. When he approaches the door, and like she's reluctant to open the door, and then she's like, "Who is it?" And he says, "FBI," and she immediately like opens the door. And he's like, "Are you a girl named Laura Palmer?" She says, "No," and he says,
when he opens the door, the first thing she says to him is, "Did you find him?"
Right. Do you think that's referring to the man that's on the couch?
That's a good question. I that might be the most logical thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, she's trying to,
She acts like she doesn't know what happened to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, she's kind of skittish, and she was like, he says your name, or your father's name is Leland. You have a mother named Sarah. He says he wants to take her to Twin Peaks to help solve this, and she kind of puts it like, normally I would shut the door on someone like you, but right now this seems like the right thing I need to do, and I also need to get the hell out of town.
Yeah. Well, something else that's interesting is when he says your mother's name is Sarah, she kind of like stutters and feels scared.
Yeah. Yeah, like, no, something did kind of click in her when he says that, right? Yeah, I agree with that. And so she's like, all right, like, let's pack a bag. And this scene is like peak Lynch. Like, this reminds me kind of the ending to Blue Velvet. And spoilers, anyone that hasn't seen Blue Velvet, but there's just a guy that's shot, but he's just still standing there. And it's not addressed why he's still standing. Like, he should be on the ground dead, but he's just shot and still standing up. Anyway, it's just kind of that subtle but very surreal abstraction that, like, I don't know, it's just really bizarre. Like, they're having this whole conversation, Dale and Carrie, quote unquote Carrie, about like, should I bring some food? Do I need a jacket? And what we see is a man dead on her couch with a hole in his head. He had been shot in the head, but it's never addressed between the two. And I partially think that's just because Coop is so focused on getting her back to Twin Peaks that he almost isn't worried about that. But at the same time, the Cooper that we know would be like, who's this man? Why is he dead?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It's just a very surreal, bizarre scene, but it's important to note that on her mantle there's a little figure of a horse. Was it a white horse?
It was a white horse. Yep.
What did you think when you saw that?
Well, I thought of obviously the white horse that Sarah Palmer sees in the original series, but I also thought of the woodsman, with the horses, the horse is the white of the eyes, I believe was part of his whole chant there.
Yeah. Yeah, like as soon as you see it, again, it's just like, it's so subtle and it's so just like nonchalant, but there's something like startling about seeing that horse because you know that there's something bigger and unsettling about seeing it there.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a direct sign of evil or just symbolically a little, I don't know, foreshadowing, I don't know. But that's kind of when you, I don't know, that and the electric or like the telephone pole, you just kind of know something's off.
Right.
So finally they get out of there after Coop's like, oh, we can pick up some food on the way, because she's like, I don't have any food for us to eat. Yeah. So they're leaving Odessa, which is where she's from, right?
Odessa, Texas. Yeah.
Odessa, Texas. And we just get a very long shot of Coop and Carrie driving.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about this scene?
Well, in classic kind of Lynch manner, it goes on a little longer than you would be comfortable with.
Yeah.
And it's not action packed or anything. It's just them driving. It's at one point Carrie's like, "Is somebody following us?" And somebody just gets up and goes around them, kind of passes them, and it's almost the sequence is very long, and
yeah,
I if I remember correctly, it's longer than 5 minutes. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, not much is said, but I mean, I think it further sets the tone of how it all ends, and it's just very, we know something's coming, and it's unsettling. But it also kind of further cements that Carrie is, I think, safe to say, a fugitive and killed that man that was, on the couch, and probably was. I don't know how she could get away with hiding the body there, and like no investigators came in to look at the house. But yeah, because she the things that are said in the scene, she says, Odessa, I tried to keep a clean house, keep everything organized. It's a long way. In those days, I was way too young to know any better. And did that, to me, that seemed very Laura-esque.
Right. Especially that last piece where she says, "In those days, I was too young to know any better."
Yeah.
For a second, I thought maybe she had become Laura at that moment.
No, it could be. But eventually, they stop at a gas station in the course of that scene and the sequence, and they arrive in Twin Peaks. It's at night. I don't know if we mentioned that, but it's at night. All of these, them driving and everything's been at night. And Carrie, aka Laura, says she doesn't recognize anything, and it's hard to say just because it's dark, If that's the reason why she doesn't recognize anything. And so Coop takes Laura to her old house, the Palmer residence, and man, I'm just like having like mental PTSD just like thinking about how this all unfolds, and I'm just like, it's such a wave of emotions. But
right,
they go up to the door, and there's just this long kind of like, Coop knocks, I think twice, like it takes a little bit for someone to arrive at the door, and you're kind of expecting, I mean, I was expecting Sarah Palmer, right? Were you in the same boat? Were you expecting Sarah to answer the door?
Yeah, definitely.
And to me, I feel like I can say this now. I wanted to say this last episode, but I felt like everything that happened was going to lead to this final showdown with Sarah or Judy, the mother experiment, whatever we've been calling her. But whether Judy was in Sarah or residing in their residence, that's what I thought this was all leading up to.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think so much about I mean, obviously I was recognizing that they're in some sort of alternate reality or timeline and something was off, but that's what I thought all of this was leading up to, and maybe it'll all go back to normal. Not the case. A separate woman that we've never seen before opens the door and doesn't recognize. And I should also mention that Carrie didn't recognize the house when they pull up. Gosh, man, this scene. So he's it's so like heartbreaking, I guess. That's the initial feeling you feel is like it's all been leading up to this, and then it's just like this the amazing detective that we know, or agent that we know Cooper to be, is just like he's just shot down. He's like, do you know Sarah Palmer? Do you like? And she keeps saying no to like all these questions that he has. What are the names? Because obviously they hold significance. But what are the names of the two names that the woman mentions of the previous owners?
So I first of all, I think I should point out that the woman that answers the door, the actress, is the actual owner of that house in real life.
Yes.
Which is something interesting to note. But Coop asks her who she bought the house from. And she says Chalfont, and that's the name of the people. I believe that was the name of the folks that in Fire Walk with Me when they're going to investigate Teresa Banks's trailer. Coop goes to when Chet Desmond disappears. Coop goes back to that trailer park and he goes to investigate, what happened to Chet, and he looks at this blank plot. And the guy that owns the trailer park says that's where the Chalfonts used to live. And then before that, the people that owned that lot were also named Chalfont. He's like, that's weird, isn't it? And I think it's later revealed that the Chalfonts are... see, that this is where I get confused, because I thought that the Chalfonts were the people that Laura helped with the Meals on Wheels and that Donna took over for. With the old lady and the kid with the cream corn,
the magic kid.
Yeah.
That's who I thought it was. That's who I was under the impression.
Right.
But basically the point being is not to get too caught up in semantics, but the names that are said are connected with the Black Lodge, correct?
Yeah, because the other one is Tremond, and then I was like, wait, hold on, I thought that was also the name of the people I just described. So let me know who those people are in the comments if I'm incorrect.
It's like one of them's definitely the kid, the grandma and the kid. But yeah, so either way, like I guess that didn't really ring in my head as it was happening, because I was just so swept up in this like overwhelming sense of like heartbreak of like, no, there's not going to be any resolve, like what is happening right now. And so like Coop asks basically all questions that he can about Sarah Palmer, and he's just like, oh, okay, have a good night, and they kind of turn around. And as they're walking out into the street, and they're about to get into the car, Coop stops and says, "What year is this?" And the feeling that I have at this point is the exact same feeling that I've described before when Sarah Palmer took off her face. It's like it's when you're so like I'm working through like heartbreak in the scene, not to be too dramatic, but like it's disappointing, but it still feels like it's relatively grounded, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's the way that Lynch just hits you with these gut punches where you just feel so uncomfortable, and that leads to like a feeling of like horror, of like you don't know what's happening. And that, I don't know, I think that's the best way I could articulate it. How would you describe it? Like, how did you feel when Coop said that?
Just internal horror, and it's uneasy feeling where you don't know what's about to happen, or because literally anything could happen.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a horrifying feeling, also because there's not much time left in the entire series,
Right.
and this character you've been rooting for this whole time might be stuck in another just unpleasant and depressing kind of. We're sending him off on, once again, not a great note.
Yeah. No, exactly. And when he says that to Carrie or Laura, you can tell she doesn't know what year it is either. I don't think, at least, because
well,
or how did you interpret it?
well, because he asked that, and then it cuts to her, and she looks a little confused, but then you hear Sarah Palmer yell out Laura's name
Very faintly in the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get a very just like I'm getting like goosebumps thinking about the scene. But yeah, she just lets out a blood curdling yell, and Coop like looks terrified when he looks over at her, and then we get a shot of the Palmer residence, and it flashes with electricity, and then that's it. And it's just like, again, I'm getting like just like a very slight like moderate feeling that I had, the same feeling that I had when I saw it, because I was just so like scared to my core, just so so shook, like what the fuck just happened. And that's how it ends. And the only other thing we see is the same shot from this season of Laura whispering in Coop's ear, but it's kind of darkly, like, I don't know how to describe it. It kind of faintly appears on the screen.
Yeah, right.
And that's it, and then the credits roll. So this is one thing I want to talk. Like, we can now we're at the point where I think we can talk through our feelings and our theories about the series and everything. I mean, at that point, right after that, it's a very dissatisfied feeling, also, wouldn't you say?
Right.
Yeah.
And like you said, talking about it even kind of puts you back in the place where you were when you watched it.
Yeah.
'Cause, like, right now, I'm like, I'm looking over my shoulder and shit, like,
Yeah.
very uneasy.
Yeah. And that's what's so like amazing about this series and just his work is like, when you describe that scene on paper, it's not really that scary, but once you've been so invested with the character and the whole, just, it's been in 18 episodes at least for this series alone, so it's like it, again, on paper it probably doesn't sound that scary, but I can't describe that level of like uneasiness that I felt when I watched it. But one thing I wanted to talk about, though, is I thought it was interesting that the place that Laura was working was Judy's. Mm-hmm. And it's almost as if like, oh man, now this is going to be the tough part of this episode, is trying to break down, because as you and I have talked about this, like, we certainly, like, I've been thinking about this constantly. I know I don't have all the answers about this, but there's a lot of things I want to throw out there, I guess. So before I go off on a tangent, did we see the electrical pole outside of the Palmer residence at the end?
I didn't.
Okay. That I wasn't sure about that. I only watched it. I only watched it once. I haven't really had the desire to rewatch it, even though I probably should.
Right. I didn't have the desire to rewatch it either, but I did.
Yeah.
I did.
And you didn't notice it?
No, but I wasn't. When I watched it the second time, I purposely was kind of just watching it to watch it.
Yeah.
Rather than to take notes on it.
Okay. Yeah, but I don't know. I just do think it's like, it's obviously on purpose that Laura is like attracted or maybe bound to this Judy, like, I don't know, spirit, because to me what the ending told me, at least, is that with the other names being the previous owners, that the Palmer residence is a host for evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we get that idea when we see the way that Sarah's acting, just in the house, and when Hawk goes to visit her, and there's rattling around, and it's not her, and it's like glasses like clicking together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's people like, I don't know. I just it reminded me of the scene in Fire Walk with Me when we see all like the spirits kind of drinking at the gas station or like hanging out.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the vibe that I was getting. Like maybe that's also what's going on there. Maybe it's like, as we saw with the convenience store that Scale Coop goes to, maybe it's not a physical location. It can change. And maybe she's hosting them there. Or maybe it's always been an evil place. But so that gave me some sort of resolution there, at least, is that the alternate reality that we're in, or this timeline that we're in, maybe it is still grounded in reality, and maybe I don't know, maybe they jump back into a reality by going, or like the reality that we know of Twin Peaks by going back into Twin Peaks, because I think that yell signifies that she remembers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what's confusing to me, is like, well, if she remembered, does that mean that are we back in the timeline, or are we still in this alternate world?
Right. And it cutting away, obviously it doesn't give us any answers or anything.
Right.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Do you think, so if we assume that Sarah Palmer is a host for Judy,
yeah,
do you think that Judy has been with her this whole time, or do you think that Judy kind of showed up after the deaths of Laura and Leland?
See, that's where it gets really confusing, and because we know that Sarah has always had, and it also depends on how you interpreted some of the other episodes. Like, I think if you believe that in episode 8 it's Sarah that swallows the bug,
mm-hmm.
I think then you could definitely make the case that Judy's always been with her.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want to go back to kind of the real life themes of Twin Peaks, and that's about abuse and how, I don't know, kind of I've seen someone describe it as like that men can kind of live in the moment and women suffer forever by mm-hmm. like the actions of men, because we see a lot of physical abuse in the show. We see, obviously people dealing with the loss, because by showing how much, like, you think about any other show where it's like a murder mystery, or, there might be multiple murders that people go and investigate, but in Twin Peaks, only one person really dies that we really care about. I mean, rest in peace, Josie,
Yeah.
She's in the door now. But by doing that, it shows how important her life was and how much it affected the whole community and everyone else around her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that because when I think about it in terms of real life, I like to think that after the death of Laura and then her realizing it was her husband that killed her, then it would make sense for this kind of all of this awful pain and drama, or not drama, trauma. Drama. Yikes. No, sorry. So all of that, it would make sense for all of that pain and suffering to manifest, or Judy could be attracted to a host that's already filled with despair. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's plenty of Garmin Bozia to feed off of there.
Right, exactly. And it's like, and I feel like looking at it like that is also kind of insensitive, because that one could equate that pain and suffering and that awfulness to evil, mm-hmm. that Judy, but maybe it's like for lack of a better word, it's a weakness, or it's a vulnerability that would attract like Judy to a host like that. That's already so. I mean, as we saw, and again, this is right before she bites this man's throat off. but Sarah's drinking heavily. She's smoking. We just get the impression that she doesn't really care about herself anymore. She doesn't care about her own life. She's just kind of going through the motions because she's already suffered such a great deal. So it's hard to say. I really don't know at this point. I don't know what I like to believe. I think I probably lean towards this happened after Laura died, because in Fire Walk with Me, she defends Laura when Leland gets really like aggressive and abusive towards her, So in my mind, I guess it makes sense that it happened afterwards. But I do think that if it is Sarah that swallowed the bug, then it would make sense too. So I don't know.
So
go ahead.
I don't know. Do you want to like talk theories about what we think happened? Like, I mean, obviously it's not a definitive answer, but like how you interpreted all of it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, do you have any point or a starting off point?
Sure. I mean, like, I was talking about earlier the scene in front of the motel. It obviously our Cooper does not seem like he's the same Cooper.
Yeah.
And yeah, to me it seems like maybe you at some point you have to merge with your doppelganger or your tulpa, and you somehow gain all of their memories and their kind of I don't know, maybe mannerisms. And so obviously we see that with Dale, and we don't know Diane quite well enough to see that with her.
Yeah.
But I think that something kind of interesting is that assuming that Diane is also Linda,
yeah,
we've seen her as Nido, as Diane, and as Linda, and all of those names have the same few letters in them, and which sounds so like conspiracy theorist.
Well,
but
because isn't Nido backwards like "Oh Diane"? I know somebody pointed that out.
Essentially,
yeah, it's almost a "Oh Diane." Anyway.
Yeah, and so anyway, I feel like what's happened here is in my brain, how I took it was when Cooper was trying to stop Laura from being murdered, Judy said, "Okay, fine, get rid of Bob, get rid of Laura's death. I'll still find a way to torment this person." And when Laura disappears, that's Judy taking her away and trapping her in this new reality. And so Cooper and Diane kind of head there, and when they're in this new reality, they kind of end up morphing together with their alternate reality selves, Cooper into Richard and Diane into Linda.
Yeah.
And somehow, I don't know if it's maybe... I don't know if it's a dream or what's going on with Laura at the end there. If that's Laura waking up and realizing that she's been put into an alternate space, or what exactly is happening there. But
yeah, like I agree with you, because like as we know, everybody else on the Blue Rose case has disappeared when they are approaching Judy and are plotting against Judy, right? And so it makes sense, and it's kind of fitting in a way that Coop is lost in time almost. We don't know what year it is, and we don't know what sort of timeline they're in. But no, I agree. I think this is all Judy working at play. That I think it's like, is it fair to say that the Judy is like the counterpart, or like the negative balance to like the fireman? Like,
yeah,
she's like that evil higher power, as he's the good higher power.
Right.
So I mean, that makes sense, because like, yeah, you can't really, I don't know, like Scale Coop got into the White Lodge, but he did nothing to try and kill the firemen, because I just don't think, like, in my mind, it can't be done. You know what I mean? Like, they're always they're the chess players, and they can just kind of move pieces as they choose to beat each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
so
Go
ahead.
something that I think we forgot to note, because I honestly didn't notice it, but in part 17, when Evil Coop is in the White Lodge, what the fireman seems to be doing is redirecting him, because on the screen we see the Palmer residence, and then when the fireman waves his hand, it shifts to the sheriff's station.
Right. Yeah.
So essentially, I think he was trying to meet up with Judy, but ultimately
No,
was
that
not
makes
able
sense,
to.
because the fireman's the one that put Freddy there, by will of his destiny. So, no, that totally makes sense. That he basically, Evil Coop was trying to go home to his wherever the I don't know, wherever the evil is. I guess that would make sense. That's
Yeah.
where he was trying to go.
Home is where the evil is,
Right.
as Evil Coop always said.
Everybody knows that saying. So, and then this kind of goes back to, I mean, it really just adds the weight to the sequence where Coop is transparent on the screen in episode 17, and says that we're living in a dream. Do you think, like, kind of like you said, do you think this is a dream? Do you think this is just an alternate reality?
Well, I see. I hate the whole thing was a dream. Like, I hate that kind of mindset.
Me too.
But to an extent, it makes sense. Not the whole thing being a dream, but maybe just like this last, 40 minutes or whatever, being a dream of a Laura Palmer of some kind.
Yeah.
But I've seen people saying, like, this whole thing was Laura Palmer dreaming about, like, people caring about her, and when you hear Sarah call for her, that's her waking up in episode 1, because it never happened. Like, I don't like thinking of it like that.
Yeah.
To me, it's more of maybe at that point when she hears Sarah Palmer call for her, that's Laura awakening in this new universe, and her and Dale have to find their way back to the Prime universe, for lack of a better word.
Right. No, I think I agree with you on that, because, like, by saying it's all a dream would kind of, like, it discredits all of the other supernatural aspects to the world of Twin Peaks that are already there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what you don't need to do. Like, weird shit happens all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need this huge umbrella of this is all a dream to, like, excuse that. Like, it's accepted in the world of Twin Peaks that shit like this happens, and they don't really know why, but that's the point, is to find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously there's some sort of connection with Audrey and Laura that we should probably talk about, because the whole, is this the story of the what's the quote, is this the story of the little girl
who lived down the lane?
Yeah. So, like, I don't know, okay, let's talk about that then. What do you think, what's going on with Audrey? Where is Audrey?
That is a great question. Do you think, well, because no one mentions her other than people that are in scenes with her, no one mentions her.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think in everyone else's minds she's dead, or do you think maybe she's been in a coma this whole time and is still in the coma? Do you think maybe somehow Judy has taken her?
Yeah. I think there's more of a real world explanation to what's going on with her.
Mm-hmm.
If we're following the timeline and what we know from Mark Frost's contributions to the lore of Twin Peaks, and she survived the bombing, obviously, because she has Richard, right? And she was in a coma. And that's also something that's interesting too, if we think about if Audrey's the mom and that whole process of her, I don't know, like raising Richard, because where is she at? Would she even be able to raise Richard? Has he always been on his own? To me, it makes sense that she survived. I mean, she's out of the coma, and maybe she's in some sort of rehabilitation center or some sort of facility that like cares for her, because maybe she suffered, brain injuries from being in the coma, and maybe. And so I guess what I like to believe is, and I take this because of how Charlie's demeanor is towards her, is it's very punctual, and when he's talking to her, he's like, I'm very tired, I'm very sleepy. And if you think about it, there's something about him that reminds me of like a doctor or a therapist.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see like a therapist kind of point of view from him.
Yeah, and it would make sense like if that were the case, that maybe he's working like late hours and he's like, I'm very tired, as in like, you're dreaming this, but I have my real life that I need to go back to. You know what I mean? Like, we've had a long session already today that I'm going to put my coat on, whatever. So to me, I think that maybe, whether she's dreaming it or maybe she is in the coma, but I think that she would never really went back to Twin Peaks. I think she's still in some sort of facility. But again, I don't see any reason why she would be like trapped like Josie or trapped by Judy or anything like that. What do you think?
Right. Well, I mean, initially that's kind of what I thought, was maybe she was trapped in either the Great Northern, and that might be what the noise that they were hearing was, or something along those lines. But yeah, right. I think upon reflection, it's more of a real world explanation, like you were saying.
Yeah. Just, I mean, but that's, that could just be us being naive just because we don't know what happened within the last 25 years. Something drastic could have happened to her. I mean, even more drastic than surviving a huge bomb explosion. So, yeah, it could be ignorance on our part just because we don't know. But I do like to think that there's some sort of real world explanation to her. What do you think that significance is, though, of the story of the little girl on the lane?
See, it's almost like her saying that to Charlie is almost like because there's a few times where Charlie seems menacing and like scary. Like he says something like, "Am I gonna have to end your story too?" I think when she says, "Is it the story of the little girl who lived down the lane?" I think that's what she's responding to. But
yes. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
It's almost as if like he's threatening to wake her up from the dream world that she's in. Yeah. And so maybe that can tie in with Laura at the end here, but who knows?
No, I think
I say that after everything I said. I was like, who knows? I don't know. Don't ask me.
Yeah. I would articulate it the same way you did. Like that totally makes sense to me, is that she chooses to put herself back into this world of Twin Peaks, and cuz the way she's dressed very eloquently, and it wouldn't make any sense, as you said, like the score of like the song that Audrey, what's it called, Audrey's Dance, like for the host at the Roadhouse to say, and now like performing Audrey's Dance, like that wouldn't make sense. That's some sort of weird real world connection, and it's too meta to make sense, I guess, for it to, I don't know, be real.
So what do you think about this theory though?
Yeah.
What if Audrey has been inside this alternate reality that Cooper and Laura just ended up in this whole time?
That could be too, because I mean, the way that Laura kind of snapped out of it, maybe that's the same way that Audrey had that moment of clarity as well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe like, I can't help but feel like, again, this goes back to the whole trauma theme. The internet has ruined what this word actually means of being triggered. It's now this kind of like petty, oh, are you annoyed? Do you not want me to talk about that? But what a trigger actually is somebody that suffered a really traumatic experience, and something that reminds them of that will snap them back to that place. You know, a place of, you know, they have PTSD about it. So I can't help but feel like, to elaborate on that, like, people that have experienced these sort of things, they have to almost create this like dreamlike version of their life to ignore these awful shitty things that have happened to them. And so when you get this reminder of what happened to you, then it just snaps you back to this place of fear and terror. And that's what I like about Twin Peaks, is I feel like I can break it down in my mind. It can make sense in a real world sense. And when it comes to storytelling, and then, you know, when you start talking about what does it actually mean in the world of Twin Peaks, that's when you can get frustrated. So that's what's tough about it. But no, I think that would make sense, though. I think that how do I describe it? Anything's on the table now. If alternate timelines and realities do exist in this world now, then why not?
Yeah.
You know? And I do think it's very interesting that they chose to use the real actor or the real person that owns that house. I don't know if that's to... Here's a couple things. I want to talk about David Lynch's philosophy real quick.
Sure.
There's two things about him. One, when it comes to mystery, he is, and I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me, but he believes in this feeling that if he gets a mystery completely solved from, you know, a full circle, he knows how everything works in it, he feels completely dissatisfied, and he thinks it ruins the experience for him. So he's from the school of thinking that he wants some things resolved, but then he doesn't want to, like, the feeling of a new mystery starting, or there still being something out there that creates that tension, that sort of uneasiness that he aspires for, I guess. And so I can't help but, because I mean, if anyone that's familiar with his filmography, with Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, there's another very notable one I can't think of off the top of my head, but he likes leaving it open-ended, I guess. And so, you know, that makes sense. I think both of us went into this not expecting this to be a perfect resolve, you know?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want it to be. So I don't know. I feel like that should definitely be noted. Because, yeah, like, kind of like what you were saying about, like, people being like, oh, like, David Lynch hates you, or this or this fucking sucks. Like, I think it's, you know, it's fair. It's art. Art is not, I think he's one of the greatest auteurs of our time, but that doesn't mean he's not, you know, immune to criticism or people being able to, you know what I'm saying? Like, have complaints about it, because everybody's different. Nobody can interpret art the same way, but
definitely. So,
yeah, I think that whole being so, I don't know, but leaning one way or the other when it comes to this is kind of silly. But also, this was the other thing I wanted to address. Okay, yeah, this is what it was. I was spaced there for a second. But when people ask him about these, like, his ideas and like, what does this mean? What does that mean when it comes to symbolism and metaphors and the deeper, you know, what people really get from his work, he never talks about the symbolism. And he said the same thing with Eraserhead. He said the ideas come to him, and all he does is just make the things with those ideas, but then once he edits and he sees the work in its completion, then he can pull his own sort of, like, meaning from it, and, like, that's his takeaway. So I know, like, for example, and this is why I'm leading into this, I know a lot of people are saying that, like, and I think it's a beautiful metaphor, but, like, when us revisiting the Palmer residence is kind of a commentary on this era that we're in, of everything being revitalized, you know, everything's coming back, you know, new season of this.
Yeah,
you know?
Reboots and revivals even of the show itself, yeah.
Right, but and what people are saying is like the commentary is that we go back and it'll never be the same. You know what I mean? When we try and revisit these things, as Coop tried to, rewrite the past and change it a little bit, the effect is something that's completely unfamiliar and it's not the same.
Right.
I think that's a beautiful metaphor, but and I mean, I don't want to understate the influence of Mark Frost because he obviously is a huge part of this, but again, that's how David Lynch handles these sort of things. Is and maybe that's just him being humble and like he doesn't want to get into those like deeper themes with people. Like there's that one quote when someone's like, "You once said that Eraserhead's your most spiritual film. Elaborate on that." And he just says no. So I don't know. That's what's so frustrating about it. Too is just like again we're left with so many unanswered questions, but I mean we're having in-depth conversations about it, and that's kind of what we want out of art. You know what I mean?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, as far as theories go, do you have any other? I mean, it's hard to sum this all up. Again, like kind of how we talked about this before we recorded is like we're probably going to do a whole like once we rewatch everything, because that's the plan. Anybody that follows us is we're just going to restart the series from the very first, the pilot episode, the original Twin Peaks, and then we're just going to go back through it. But yeah, like we don't have all the answers, and I'm sure however I feel about this is going to be much different once we rewatch The Return again. So, but as far as like theories and stuff, is there anything else that's kind of on your mind that you're thinking about?
No, I mean, I read something new every day about someone's interpretation of the ending and what it means, and I love that there's not an answer. I love that it's how you take it, and I think that like being open to other people's interpretations and hearing what other people have to say, then you can kind of craft your own kind of what happened, and and that's a really neat thing, and you can't say that about really many other television series.
Yeah, like that again. That's what's so and like why we keep or at least I keep referring to it as so like innovative and stuff. It's just like it feels like the weight of everything that happens in this show is so significant, and it makes you want to just like, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And even if it's something that's not even that big, like I had my parents are watching this show too, and like my dad will ask me like, what was all of that about with like the warden that got killed? Like, what did that mean? I'm like, that really wasn't much. Like there really wasn't a whole lot to that side, that little story. But you search for the meaning and like the significance in everything that happens, and the way that it's kind of been disjointed too. You're just trying to wrap your head around everything.
Right.
Here's a question. Do you think there should be another season, or do you think it could leave off here?
Well, I mean, while it can definitely leave off here, it's obviously left people clamoring for more. And I think my initial reaction was, well, I need more. To quote Cooper in part 16, I need you to make another. I don't think that there needs to be more. But if David Lynch and Mark Frost and all the people involved feel like they have more story to tell, then all power to them. I think kind of one of the upsetting things for some people are the cast members that passed, even just between production on this series. There's certain characters that they wouldn't be able to bring back in the traditional sense, but they worked so well around like Frank Silva's death and David Bowie's that maybe they'll have unique ways to bring other characters back if they do decide to continue.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about it, like I would be interested to see how they brought back Miguel Ferrer or Albert, how they would deal with his loss. But they did, and again we've talked about this, but they handled everybody's real life death so well and made them they put them on this like pedestal, I guess, their characters, you know what I mean? Like they really added legacy and weight to who they were in the original runs. And so that's what's really cool about it. But I'm with you. Like I don't want it to be like this we have to have more just so we know, because I know it'll never be perfectly resolved. Like, they make another season, there's going to be another divisive ending, you know?
Right.
I guess if we're talking as far as like actual real life possibility, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think David Lynch is making movies anymore. Because and this is okay, man. This reminded me. I want to talk about the 8, and so I don't remember who says it. I don't know if it's the fireman or that 10 is the number of completion.
Dale says that. Cooper says that.
Dale says it. Okay.
Yeah, and I thought that was just him being, classic wacky Dale, because he says the number is 253.
Yeah.
He says, which adds up to 10, the number of completion.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was just like a wacky Daleism, because that was when that was the brief moment in time when we had our Dale Cooper back.
Yeah. And so, but Lynch, if I'm not mistaken, his official filmography, he's directed 10 films. And so people, like, I remember a few months ago, he said that he probably wouldn't make any more. So I'm saying all this because I guess if there were a chance that there'd be more Twin Peaks, he would have, like, his energy and his time could and would be focused towards it if he isn't making any more quote-unquote movies. But then again, Twin Peaks, they've said, was an 18-hour movie that they just... The return, it was, yeah. But man, it's been such a good run. Like, that's the thing, is like, I can't even feel disappointed because I didn't know that a show like this could exist, you know?
Yeah.
Like, when you told me that there would be like a Twin Peaks revival, it's like, this isn't what I was expecting. Were you? You know?
No, not at all. Yeah. I think that I was in the band that was more in tune to expecting Dale's return to the town, and I mean, like, of course they had to deal with the threads that were planted in the season 2 finale, but I was more expecting him to get back to Twin Peaks rather quickly, and whether or not evil Dale Cooper was the final kind of confrontation that they had, I wasn't sure, but when they advertised it, it was the picture of Dale Cooper and the picture of Laura Palmer imposed over the trees, and it says it's happening again. So I guess what I more expected out of the series was another adventure in Twin Peaks. But what we got was something completely different, and it's not disappointing in the slightest. It's just it's so different and unique from I'm sure most people's expectations that it will be remembered for sure.
Right. And I think one of the most impressive feats, and we've talked about this too, is like this, like, so many people were harsh on Fire Walk With Me. People were saying that this creative genius, David Lynch, lost it. He doesn't have what it takes. I'm pretty sure, like, Quentin Tarantino even said, like, I won't see another David Lynch movie. Like, he was shit on for that. But after you watch this, it, like, I don't know, it adds so much. Fire Walk With Me is the complete basis, really, for the show and the kind of direction that it went in. Because it's kind of like, I mean, we talked about how they wanted to go with that series with Fire Walk With Me and, like, following the agents, and they were kind of able to do that in a roundabout way with this series. Like, all their hopes and aspirations for what that could have been, I really feel like they did it with this. So,
right.
Man, I mean, it's hard to wrap this up. I feel like we could keep talking, but we should probably wrap it up at some point here soon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess on that note, do you have anything more to add?
I don't. I will just say that we're not abandoning the world of Twin Peaks. The return might be over, but Vin and I are such a fan of Twin Peaks that we just want to keep breaking it down, and we just love doing this. So yeah, we're gonna be starting sometime next week. We'll have a regular upload schedule. We're gonna be viewing an episode from the original run, talking about it, and it'll be the same old fire pod with me that you are accustomed to.
Yeah.
But that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, like I said, thank you for listening, and leave your theories, your comments on maybe things we missed. down below, and we'd love to read them and hear what you guys thought. Anyway, my name's Vinny. As always, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna miss you.